Yo, what's up, all you burners, stoners, and potheads out here? This is Weedman 420 with the Weedman 420 Chronicles. How all you burners, stoners, and potheads doing out there? Mrs. Weedman, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
We have a special guest on the show this evening, and this is to end Women's History Month, and we have two badass women, Mrs. Weedman being one, and
Thanks.
it was her birthday, and she just turned the big, can I say your age?
Sure.
49. One more year away from 50, baby.
What's T laughing about?
We also got T in the house.
Shush.
Yo.
What's up, T?
What up, what up?
And you know what? She's one more year away from 50, but she's the badassest, sexiest 49-year-old I know.
Oh, my. Okay. Thanks.
But we have a special guest to end Women's History Month, and her name is Ellen. Ellen, how you doing?
I'm great. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Glad to have you. And we're super stoked because Ellen is a pillar in the industry right now. We're super stoked to have her on the show and happy and love this. But Ellen, I'm going to ask you a question I ask all of our guests that join us. And we've all asked this question to ourselves, and we've talked about it. You smoke weed because?
I smoke weed because it helps with endometriosis.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know how many of your listeners know about endometriosis, but it affects 1 in 10 women, which is an enormous, enormous number, especially for a disease that not many people know about. It takes an average of 10 years to be diagnosed.
Wow.
And women see an average of 8 doctors before they get that diagnosis. So you can imagine the cost and time and stress that goes into that. And cannabis is an incredible treatment for me for the symptoms of endometriosis, which are extreme pain that come with your period. It's a monthly pain. And so cannabis is amazing for that. I love it for many, many reasons, but it truly is a life-changing thing for me with endometriosis.
That's awesome.
Do you smoke or partake recreationally also, or mostly just medically? Both?
I do. I mean, it's one of the symptoms of endometriosis is infertility, which I experienced. And I was thinking about this earlier. I got my medical cannabis card in 2016. I live in California. And very soon after that, tried to start having a baby. So I wasn't using cannabis. And then I had a baby. I have a 2-year-old. He's almost 3. And so the cannabis consumption for me really started once he was about 1 year old. And so I came kind of back into the legal market. And it's been amazing for me because I have learned so much by being in the industry, but I also know a lot more of what I like and what I don't like. So it's been a really helpful part of my COVID existence. And yeah, cannabis is an amazing plant.
Great.
It is an amazing plant. And since we're talking about smoking, I'm going to burn right now.
Mm-hmm.
And Mrs. Weedman is taking over the show. This is the final day of Women's History Month, but not the end of women history, because the more women get into cannabis, the more history you can make. And we've read about a lot of women in this month about the history and the advocacy of women in cannabis, and women have been in cannabis for thousands and thousands of years. So this is not the end of women being in cannabis, and we're super stoked. So Mrs. Weeman's going to take it away while I smoke some gorilla cake that was given to me by a friend of mine.
Sweet. So we have Ellen on the show, and Ellen is she is the co-founder of the wildly popular High Guide, which is a women's cannabis handbook. So we're super excited to hear more about that, Ellen, and she'll talk to you a little bit more about herself and her background. But like Mr. Weedman was saying, like, we very much are here to advocate cannabis, whether it's recreational or medical, and we are here to educate and really stop the stigma that comes along with it. And we just watch as culture changes around cannabis. Just in our own circles of life, we see the mentality about it changing, and we're excited to see that continue, and we're trying to do what we can to help that. And Ellen, you are also doing the same. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. You just told us how you became a fellow burner, but just talk to us about your experience with cannabis and what it is that you do.
Sure. Well, I live in San Francisco with my husband and my 2-year-old son. I've lived in California for 12 years. I grew up on the East Coast, and I am the co-creator of How to Do the podcast, which was founded in 2019 and really is our platform for helping to demystify cannabis for women. We think that women can uniquely benefit from cannabis, and so we decided that telling stories about it in what we think is the most modern way to connect with people. You guys obviously do too. Podcasts rule for really sharing information that might otherwise be hard to get or to care about, and weed has always been sold through word of mouth. So we also think that there's just something kind of about the oral tradition of cannabis that is really important to especially women who are trying to navigate a newly legal market.
Mm-hmm. That's for sure. I mean, we even just talk about how, like in mom circles, your little guy is not quite in school yet, probably. So you're not necessarily dealing with all the other moms like on the schoolyard kind of thing. But I know that when our kids were in elementary school, if I brought up cannabis at that point in life, I would have just been,
you're a sinner.
Yeah. not even that. I mean, our kids went to public schools. It wouldn't have been like on a religious aspect. It would have just been like, oh, she smokes pot, like it would have been just a stigma against you as a mom. And
Sinner.
Yeah. And I still do find that, like, I don't know if you made reference in your day-to-day work that you were going to have a glass of wine tonight when you're finishing up your paperwork for the day, that'd be totally cool. But if you said you were going to smoke and finish up your paperwork, they'd be like, oh. And then if there was some possible little error in your paperwork, they're like, oh, it's because she smokes weed, right? And it just doesn't happen with alcohol. It doesn't happen with other things. But the culture is changing, and we're all working on that. So your podcast, you bring on a lot of guests and you talk about a lot of topics that are very just sensitive to women and the way that cannabis can fit into the lives of women and help with that. Do you want to talk about maybe how we can demystify cannabis and why it would be important to demystify cannabis?
Sure. And I think that the very first and most important thing to remember about cannabis is that there are still 40,000 people in prison in our country for cannabis crimes. And that's an enormous number of people, but it also is an enormous number of families that have been affected. And recognizing that and seeing it for what it is and seeing the disproportionate number of people of color that are in prison is something that I think a lot of people over the past few years have really started to understand and see as just not right. And so I think that has helped a lot with destigmatizing or at least the pressure to lessen the judgment, because maybe this has just been unequal, and I've been programmed to think something that isn't actually true. So I think that is incredibly important to remember as we think about the really like fundamentally important reasons why we need to destigmatize it. COVID, in my mind, has also played a huge role in the pace of change and people's opinions changing around cannabis. And I think that's because the conversation around mental health has just really been one that almost every person in the world has probably had to have. And cannabis plays a role in that. And I think that when I think about stigma, it sort of implies what other people think of me or of you. And I think what COVID has done is made that really a much more personal question, which is, I don't see anybody. I don't really care. Like, how do I actually feel better? How do I get through my days? And I think that has, depending on your situation, there are people that are extremely lonely. I have a 2-year-old. I live in an apartment. I have a dog and 2 cats, and I never get a moment alone. Like, that's my COVID reality. So, but everyone's is different. And so really figuring out what it is that makes you happy, that makes you feel good, that gets you through the day, I think is something that is going to and has already helped help with cannabis and thinking about it differently. And then the final thing I'll say is just the health benefits. I've been in this industry now, and I can't tell you the number of stories that I've heard of women's lives who have been completely transformed by cannabis. And you can only hear so many of those stories before you just can't, like, it just seems so crazy that people still have a problem with the plant. So I think those are the three things that stand out the most to me. What about you? I mean, I live in California. Some people say the California market is 15 years ahead of some of these markets that'll be legalizing in the next few years. I mean, how are things in Illinois?
Yeah, well, we are recreational now for about 14 months, 15 months. And I feel like the conversation of cannabis comes up a lot more in a friendly way. I hear more women. There's a lot of women in my office. With COVID, I'm not in the office all the time, but when there is conversation between coworkers, it comes up in a friendly way, and that's positive. But then it also, it's almost like a double-edged sword. Is it comes up in a conversation and it comes up with positivity, like, oh, I want to try it, I want to do this, I want to do that. But then there also is, then there's a, oh, I had such a bad experience, I was under my desk, I was so, over like high, and I was so paranoid I could never do it again. So what I always find is that there, it's like people just don't understand it. And
Education.
the more we talk about it, and the more openly we talk, like I talk very openly about it, and people in my office know that. And so when we get into that topic and then people start getting sensitive about it, or putting out like information that I feel is just misinformation based on a bad experience, I try to correct it. And I try to use that as a platform to educate, even if it's just a few little blurps of information that I can share. I feel like all of those little bits help. And overall in the city, like I hear things all the time. Like I had a client who said he wanted to move because he doesn't want to drive on the highway and have to smell pot. And the highway that he has to drive on to go to the city, he has to smell pot all the time now. I'm like, really? I mean, it's not affecting your life.
I want my
I think
windows
it
open
smells
and
good.
smell it.
Whenever I smell it, I'm like, oh, put the windows down. So, I mean, I feel like as much as we're advancing, we're not. And I think it's just time. And like you said, California is so far ahead of us. So far ahead of us.
California's been medically legal since 96, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so they've had a lot of history with growing even before 96, when it was brought over, when the Hindu Kush was brought over in the 70s in California. They've been growing in the Green Triangle forever, up in those beautiful mountain ranges, and people have been growing for so cannabis, from the hippies from Berkeley and on, have been promoting cannabis as a wellness. Jack Herrera and all these advocates of cannabis, Brownie Mary, who we've talked about. California, yes, is probably more than 15 years ahead of everybody because they've believed in cannabis for so long. But then you also have the state of Washington. You also have Colorado, Nevada, which is really big right now, in top in cannabis mind for the West. Now you have the Midwest, where Michigan has been around for a long time doing medical and caregiving. People can grow in their own home. So the understanding of cannabis in Michigan is very big, with over 300 dispensaries in Michigan. You also have Illinois, which is around 100 dispensaries. People can now home grow because if they have the medical card. So people are getting to understand cannabis more, because once you start growing it, it becomes a zen to me. And I've said this on the show many times. I become one with my plants, and I enjoy looking at them every day and growing. So to me, with growing brings more education, and you get more understanding of the plant. And that's why I'm such an advocate for freeing the plant and let everybody be able to home grow. Because I'm a big advocate for that. I think people should be able to grow a cannabis plant like they grow a tomato plant, and not be judged for it, and not be arrested for it, and not get fined for it. You should be able to grow your own medicine. They do in other countries, and why not here? So to me, the Midwest is a little bit behind in some ways. Don't forget, Illinois was the first state to not put it on the ballot either. We were legislative brought in, so we weren't, which I don't really like, because we weren't able to choose how we wanted cannabis to be made. It was thrown in our face how it was supposed to, how the laws were set up. So we didn't have a chance to fight for it. Am I happy that Illinois is recreational? Yes. Am I happy that they're medical? 100%. but I think there was better ways we could have went about it than what I see now. So yes, we are behind in a lot of ways, but also moving and progressing forward.
Yep, definitely. So let's talk some more. You had mentioned how you see it helping cannabis, helping women with women's health issues. What do you feel are some links between women's health and cannabis?
Well, I think that there are just a lot of women that are looking for help outside of traditional medicine. I think a lot of women that I've talked to, and myself included, have kind of been failed by the traditional medical system. And there was a study that came out last year from the University of Chicago and Berkeley that talked about how women for years and years have been widely over-medicated and suffering really extreme side effects because of that. And that's because drug dosages were calculated based on studies that were on male subjects. And so the dosage of what you're putting into your body has such an enormous impact on your body. I was thinking about what you were saying about the plant and growing it and how that connects you with it. And I think that, most pharmaceuticals started out as plants too, but now they are single compounds. And what I've learned is that when you put a single compound into your body, it may solve that problem, but it also kind of wreaks havoc on your system. Whereas when you take a whole plant and put it into your body, there is a balancing effect that comes with that. And I think that at its real base level, that is partly why cannabis is so effective for the medical treatments that people are seeking it out for. And autoimmune diseases, so autoimmune diseases affect between 8 to 10% of the population. But of that percent, it's 80% women. So most of the people that have autoimmune diseases are women. And autoimmune diseases are often related to hormones and imbalances in your body. And cannabis has just shown incredible promise in solving chronic pain, in bringing a lot of women relief when they really were in a place where many of them, the ones that I speak to anyway, were sort of at the end of their rope. I mean, I interviewed 2 women last week. One has lupus and one has Crohn's disease. They were on respectively 11 and 14 medications per day. So you can just imagine the side effects. And both of them have been able, through different methods, they chose to do it different ways, remove all of those medications and rely solely on cannabis. It's completely transformed their lives. They live now instead of just operating, medicine to medicine, dealing with the side effect, having to take another medicine because of another side effect. And so I think when I think about the health benefits of cannabis, really what stands out to me most is limiting the side effects and trying to solve your problems through other methods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's kind of taking a more holistic or naturopathic approach towards healing yourself. Like you said, so many medications become an additional medication and then an additional medication because you now have a side effect that you didn't have, and then a doctor prescribes another medicine to you to get rid of that side effect. And it's just this whole domino effect where if you do take a more natural approach, I mean, I think there's always a time and a place for medicine. I think that medicine is important. But
I do too.
But I also think that there's a lot of remedies that we can achieve and a lot of health benefits that we can achieve from a natural approach first, and really getting to understand and know our bodies. I mean, that just being intuitive and knowing when something isn't right. Like you said, with endometriosis, a woman could visit 8 doctors before she's diagnosed, and it can take 10 years. And so if you are the more in tune with your body, the better you can describe to those doctors the issues that you're having, right? And I think that when you do take a natural approach to that, you aren't modified by medicine, right? You're saying, these are my issues. I know this is my body having a problem. It's not a side effect of medicine. And if cannabis can allow your body to be in its natural state, I think that you can get maybe a better answer from a medical doctor, right? Because you're in a more natural, balanced place. I don't know. I just think taking a natural approach, I think there's just so many people that have so much faith in the medical practice and the medical field. And again, it is very important and there is a place for it. But I think that cannabis and supplements, natural supplements, have an equally important place. But really, I mean, like hospitals are starting to realize that, and medicine is starting to realize that. Like now they're giving probiotics in the hospital. We've had people tell us that they have family who have been given CBD in the hospital, so and in therapy centers. So it's starting to come around, and we just need to
Yeah,
see more of that.
definitely. And one of the questions that I get a lot when I talk about cannabis and using it for medical purposes is how do I talk to my doctor about it? And
Mhm.
I think that can be really tricky. And I ask most women that I talk to what they have done. And I would say that the recommendation really is think about whether the relationship with your doctor is working for you. You
Mhm.
know, I think that sometimes when you find a doctor, it's like, okay, I just am going to go to the doctor and do whatever they say. That's definitely how I was a few years ago
Mhm.
before having health struggles that they couldn't solve. And that's when I started to realize that, oh, second opinions are probably a really good idea. And now that I want to talk to cannabis with physicians, you know, it's definitely not something we learned about in medical school. It's definitely not something that all of them are comfortable with. And you know, I think about cannabis all the time. It's my job, but most people don't. And especially if you're a busy doctor, you know, it just might not
Right.
be something that you've gotten to yet. And so the advice from women really is, you know, ask your doctor, tell your doctor the things that cannabis helps with and say, I want to continue receiving these benefits. How can you help me to understand whether what I'm taking is going to be amplified, whether there's any drug interaction I need to be worried about? Like, really being like, this helps me. I know me. And so, how can you, as a doctor who has expertise that I don't have, help me to get to the best place where I'm in optimal health? And I like that approach because it feels open to me. I hope it does when
Mhm.
I'm saying it
Mhm.
out loud. And if the doctor isn't there with you, I think you kind of know by body language, by their answer, and find another doctor.
Yeah.
It, yeah, I think
Yeah.
that that's kind
Yeah,
of where you have to be.
I, I agree. I mean, when I go to the dentist or a doctor and for pain or anything like that, the first thing they try to prescribe, like when got some teeth work done, he goes, "Oh, I'm going to prescribe you some painkillers." I'm like, I'm good. I don't need it." And they give you that look, like, really? I'm like, no, I'm just going to use cannabis and I'll be good. It's gonna help me sleep. It's gonna take the pain away, and I'll be just fine. And you kind of shock them at first, or they give you that like that one eye look, like, huh, kind of look, you know. Well, I'm good. I don't want it.
Well, and you always say, like, when you come home and retell the story, it always seems to be like the doctor kind of laughs it off, like, all right, buddy, like, whatever, like, have your cannabis.
Right.
But they're like so completely surprised that you
Yeah.
don't want pain meds. And
Yeah.
yeah,
When I had my back injury, and the first thing the doctor wanted to do was prescribe me opioids and muscle relaxers and painkillers and all that stuff. I'm like, I don't want it. He's
yeah.
like, why don't you want it? I'm like, because I don't want to get hooked and then have to want to take it. I can stop cannabis anytime. I don't choose to because I like it, but I use it for pain. I use it to sleep. I also use it for enjoyment and social activities. But being able to say to a doctor, I don't need what you're prescribing me because I have something that's better, that's for me, for my body, for my endocannabinoid system,
Mhm.
and that's going to be a little bit healthier because I don't have to smoke it. I can take an edible, I can take a tincture, I can take it under the tongue, whatever way you want to do it. But I don't need your opioid or your medicine that it may harm my body in the long term. That's
Yeah.
just
I
my
couldn't
two
agree
cents.
more. Yeah, I mean, I feel your pain on dental work. I had an accident and I broke 16 teeth, and so I've
Oh,
been
goodness.
for
Ouch.
10 years, you know, dealing with the pain. And, you know, if you when you break a tooth, you basically have 3 appointments per tooth is kind of where it breaks down. And about a year and a half ago, I had to have another round of this and several different surgeries on my gums. And I mean, it's crazy. I work in this industry. I should have had the conversation you had, but they were like, here's your medicine, go pick it up. And I took it and I came home and I took one of the painkillers and I felt absolutely terrible. And then I said, oh, well, maybe I should try some cannabis. And I I started with a sort of 1-to-1 kind of ratio. I was smoking, I think it was Cannatonic with a vape pen, and I just kind of wasn't getting the relief that I wanted. And my husband and I were talking about it, and he's like, Ellen, for acute pain, you need more THC. So I think it was Granddaddy Perp that I had, which normally is a little too strong for me.
On this show. It's a fan
Yeah,
favorite.
it can just sometimes it's just like a little too much for me, but it could not have been better after the surgery. And I actually wrote this down. When I was taking the painkillers, I needed them after 3.5 hours. Like I was like, this is painful. I'm scared. I don't want the pain to get worse. So I would take one. It was 7 hours after smoking the Granddaddy Perp. That's when I
Wow.
felt like, oh, I need a little bit more. That's double and a
That's
half.
double.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is an incredible difference in the amount of medicine that has to come into my body and wreak havoc on it. It was just really a remarkable difference. And I had no side effects. I actually felt great. I feel like I wrote some insightful things in my journal and had a nice
Well, I was going to bring up the
Good.
side effects from painkillers, and then when you come off of painkillers, the withdrawals. Because if you're taking it 2 or 3
Mhm.
times a day, and you're taking it for 30 days or 60 days,
And we're
because
talking about opioid-based. Right.
opioid-based painkillers. You have to come down from that. You have to eventually get off that, and coming off those for some people is very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I know if I take a break, well, I don't take a break from cannabis, but if I ever decide to take a break from cannabis again, I did for 5 years, but I never got the withdrawals. I never felt like crap for a week or a month after I stopped using cannabis. And that's maybe not for everybody, but for me and my body. But coming down from opioids, from what I've heard from people, is one of the worst and hardest things to do on their body. Not only just mentally it fucks them up
Well,
too.
they say after 5 consistent days of usage, like based on being prescribed pain meds, so you're using them 24 hours a day for 5 days, your body is chemically dependent on them, an opioid.
That's nuts.
So you need them. You've become addicted that quickly.
It's crazy to hear that,
That's crazy.
and to know that doctors would prescribe something synthetic that's made in a lab versus a plant that's coming from the ground that's been used for 10,000 years. Yeah. That to me still dumbfounds me. And we've gone through this with the war on drugs and the war on cannabis and Harry Asslinger, as we call him, and why all this stuff has gone on today. But to me, prescribed doctors learn about it. We need to please get it off the Schedule 1 so we can get this more hands of doctors and scientists. I mean, in Israel, I don't know if you've read anything about Israel, but they're so far ahead of us in scientific ways, and Dr. Michellam and what he's learned about THC and CBD and all the medical effects. They're so far ahead of us in the medical aspect of cannabis and learning to use that as a medicine, to where the United States is getting left behind. And I'll say it. We are our friends to the north and our friends to the south in Mexico and Canada are going to blow us away in the next 5 years if we don't get off the pot.
Yeah.
No
and I
pun
think
intended.
that medically speaking, a doctor won't prescribe it because of it being federally illegal, right? They're not going to risk their medical license. So things just have to change in the big picture of laws before that happens. But just all we can hope is that doctors, people in the medical field, are starting to be more aware of it being.
Yes, that's what I
helpful,
like to hear.
Right. So we were going to talk about alternative healthcare options and why they are necessary within medicine. But do you feel like there's more that you might have on that, or did we really just cover it in what we were just talking about?
I think we covered it. I mean, we haven't talked very much about sleep.
I want to go to sleep. I can't wait.
And I was reading somewhere, I think a data company out of California was saying that over 60% of cannabis consumers say that they consume it for sleep. And sleep is a really complicated topic. What makes me sleep better might not make you sleep better. And so it's definitely very personal. And several times on our show, you'll probably hear us say, this is the moment when we tell you have to experiment. So there definitely is some experimentation that is going to be required. But a mix of CBD and THC. I mean, I can share what I use for sleep. I don't know if you all use it for sleep, but it's amazing for me. And I mostly just use CBD for sleep, and I find that THC, even sort of a strain that is not going to be as energizing tends to be energizing for me. I think I'm just sensitive a little bit. And so CBD helps me to go to sleep. And what we discovered, there's actually a company in Chicago called Equilibria that we love. It's women founded, and they have an incredible amount of data. And they've said that for about 30% of their customers, CBD is livening, so it won't put you to sleep. So 70% of people can go to sleep just using CBD. Another 30% may need THC or may need something else. But I do think that sleep is a topic that we get a lot of questions about, and cannabis can really, really help. And again, get you off of the Ambiens or what other, the other drugs that, in my opinion, while they work, it's sort of a blunt force instrument a bit. Whereas with cannabis, it just feels like if you're tired, you can sleep and you can dream. And when I'm on Ambien, it's like I am just out, which isn't a feeling I love.
So when you are smoking a CBD for bed, are you say you do a 1-to-1, so there is a small amount of THC in there?
No, so for bed, I actually take a CBD gel cap, and it's all CBD, and it just goes in that little, plastic things that tells me what day I take. I take a multivitamin and different things, and so that's what I take for sleep, and it works great.
Okay.
Nice.
All right.
We usually do a ratio. Need a little bit of that THC to kickstart it in, but yeah, we always do a ratio, like a 1-to-1 or a 4-to-1 or a 10-to-1. I don't, the 10-to-1s and above don't really do much for me, but the 1-to-1s I like to smoke out of a vape or take sublingual or an edible. I've smoked some CBD, just straight CBD flower before, or a ratio mix, which I like. Actually, that's probably my favorite. The ratio mix, 4-to-1 flower is usually the best for me if I do decide to smoke a CBD.
4 parts CBD, 1 part THC.
Yes.
And then, are you getting your CBD products from a head shop, or are you getting your CBD products from a dispensary?
So I either buy them online. I always try to buy from women-owned companies, and there are a lot of amazing companies that just have CBD that have been founded by women. And so you can buy those across the country. We have a list of women-owned companies on our website, Do the Pot, that we think are doing it really well. And testing is extremely important.
Do you want to name a couple?
Yeah, well, I use Equilibria, which I love, which you can purchase anywhere across the U.S. Rosebud CBD is another really good one. There are a lot of great companies that are coming out of Oregon and Northern California. So it's sort of, cannabis grows really well in certain places, and I like to try and get outdoor grown cannabis whenever I can and know where the farm is. So any company that does not provide you with a certificate of analysis on their website, just don't even buy it. The certificate of analysis, honestly, even if you can't read it, just the fact that they put it up there is like an important step one. And 100%. On our website, we also have some things that you need to look for on the COA. So for me, it's about making sure that the company is doing it right and testing everything. What's nice about living in a legal state is if I buy any CBD product in a dispensary that's licensed, then I know that it's passed all of its regulations. So if you're stepping into this as a new consumer, getting it from a dispensary is always going to hopefully give you comfort. And then you might need to do a little bit more research around the companies if it's something that you can buy online.
Great.
Sweet. Thank you for that info. That's awesome.
So, Mr. Weedman, you had a question about women. And
I did?
Yeah.
I had a question?
You get a question.
Right. I do get a question. I do. I love women, so especially the one I'm across from right now. So,
thanks.
You like that? You like that, men? Always remember, throw the compliment at the end. It'll save you a lot of getting your ass kicked in. So remember that. Remember, birthdays, flowers are always a woman's favorite. Flowers, dinner. Right, Mrs. Weedman?
Hold the door.
We hold the door.
A little chivalry is good.
It never dies. It'll always be good at the end. Tell us how women are the future of the industry. I read so many articles about women in the industry, and I absolutely love it. Like I said, I'm with 2 badass women in the industry right now, and I get to be actually do this show with one. So, I mean, what are your predictions, and what can women do? I guess this is a two-part question. What can women do to like make a big impact on top of the future of women in the industry? But I want to know what they can do to make an impact, a blast. Something they could do to like, I mean, like you said, there's women-owned companies who use a lot and stuff like that, and they are making a big impact. But give me a couple things, give me a couple wowers, you know?
Well, the biggest wow, I think, is that women make 80 to 90% of household purchasing decisions across consumer products.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. You 100% right there. But we also don't have a choice. So I gave it up a long time ago.
I bet Mrs. Weedman makes really good choices for your family, which
The best.
is what
The
most
best.
women do. Yeah, so 80 to 90% of purchasing decisions are made by women. And if cannabis is going in the direction of being a consumer product, then it makes sense that that would be the same number. Just this year in California, Ease, which is a delivery service here, said that women make up 49% of their California customers. So in a very few years, that's gone from 20 to 30% women to 50% women, and that's just as customers. So I think if you are a cannabis company and you are not thinking about women being a larger and larger part of your business, you're really missing out on an enormous market. And the purchasing decision part to me is what is so interesting, because I think that as cannabis becomes something that people understand has multiple uses in various parts of their life, that women are going to become even more involved in that purchasing decision. And so it's super exciting because that means that the market is hopefully going to recognize the importance of women's voices. And I think that's where the second part of your question comes in, that this is a new industry. It's newly legalizing. It's changing so quickly since I founded this business 2 years ago. 7 states and 1 country have become legal. So Mexico, just in the past few weeks, it's been Virginia and New York, huge, enormous, influential states. New York being like the culture capital of our country, Virginia being a former huge tobacco state. And so the pace of change is coming so quickly. And I mean, part of my mission is to get women to be 50% of the power in cannabis. There's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be. And women need to be on every board. Women need to be in the C-suite of companies. Better products come when people who use them have a voice. And we can just see some of the things that I brought up earlier about the testing for prescription drugs not being on women and the massive, massive negative effects that has had on women. And I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's highly unlikely that there were a lot of women running the pharmaceutical companies for the past 50 years that have made those decisions. So it's really, really vital to me that minorities and underrepresented groups in general get a seat at the table at these companies. And the way to do that is buy weed from women, buy weed from people of color. Your dollars go a long way to showing the market what you want. And it just couldn't be more important to, as a consumer, vote with your dollars.
Totally.
Great stuff.
And I just, when you were talking about women in cannabis, I thought it would be important to share for women here in Illinois. On Facebook, there is a nice group. I think they've got over 5,000 followers. It's called Illinois Women in Cannabis. And I went to a couple of their social get-togethers before we were even a legal state. I don't think we were even medical yet. So this might have been back in like maybe 2013 or 14. And so there were a couple of women who were starting this just network. It was just information. It was just going to libraries and maybe having one person show up and talking to them about cannabis in a familiar way or in a approachable way. And they were really great. So they do mixers. Obviously, in times of COVID, they're not doing that. But their little caption here says, Illinois Women in Cannabis is a membership-based organization comprised of professionals and entrepreneurial women in Illinois. It was founded in 2014 as a social support group for women seeking to enter into the rapidly growing medical cannabis industry in Illinois. Membership is open to women who are interested in working in the Illinois medical cannabis industry and creating opportunities for women in the industry. So super cool networking group. Again, they're doing more online, Zoom, that type of thing. But I presume once COVID clears up or we can get outdoors, they'll start doing networking events. But there may be even chapters. I don't know that this is something that has become national, but there might be chapters in other states now. But great resources, great ways to network for women. When I went to one of their mixers, I got to meet people that were at that point, I think there were maybe 2 cultivation centers, and I got to meet the CEOs from the cultivation centers and, stumble on my words and be completely starstruck, but, but it was fun. It was fun. So I look forward to that coming back around and being able to get back out there a little bit more.
Yeah, we have one all women owned in the state of Illinois, Nature's Grace. They're an all women owned. It's actually a mom that owns it. Yeah, she's awesome. So hearing about her story.
That's a cultivation center.
Cultivation center. Yeah. So one here in Illinois. I want to say though, your knowledge and everything we've listened to on your podcast and everything you've talked about today really shows me more and more that women, and I've said this, will rule the world one day. They think better. They are more compassionate and have a lot of passion for the industry. And I'd love to see it. I love to see, talking to a lot of women in the industry, reading about a lot of women in the industry. You gals are making history and changing the world one bowl at a time, I guess I could say, right?
One joint at a time.
One joint at a time, one bowl, one bong rip. So, but you got anything else to say?
Well, I will definitely check out Nature's Grace. That's really great to hear. We have a list of women-owned growers and women-run growers on our website, so you can check that out. We're always looking to add to it. So if any of your listeners want to DM me, that would be great. And 2 companies in the Midwest that we work with a lot, I just wanted to shout out Equilibria, which is in Chicago-based, is CBD, wonderful, high quality product. And then Sarah Jane is a great brand. I believe they're only in Michigan right now, but I think they're working on Illinois as well. So those are some companies that we've just had a great experience with and women run, and they really want to help women understand the plant and figure out how it can work best for them. And I think that is definitely something that I have found the more women that I connect with.
Nice. Go ahead and what's your website, your social media, and your podcast, so our listeners can follow you and get to know you.
Great. Thank you. Well, the podcast is called How to Do the Pot, and it's available wherever you listen to podcasts. Our website is dothepot.com, and you can follow us on Instagram at dothepot.
Sweet.
I love the name.
Thank you. Well, it was funny when we
love
started.
I think it's awesome.
We were trying to figure out, something that if we were trying to think of the name, and I was talking to different friends, and I'd say, it's going to be about how to do the pot, and everyone would always laugh. And I thought, that actually might be the right emotion for getting into this, especially 2 years ago when people were a little bit more uncomfortable. So we definitely have fun. We want to share these stories. We want to teach you how to do it. I mean, I heard you before talking about your office, women telling stories of having bad experiences. I just don't want anyone to ever have another bad experience.
Right.
You don't have to. This is such a wonderful plant. It can bring so much to your life. And one bad experience really can turn you off and potentially, get you further away from something that could really, really benefit you. So start with low doses, take it slow. Edibles take an hour to 2 hours to kick in. Don't take another one. We've got episodes on edibles that talk all about that. And we've really tried to make our shows very practical. They're also really short. We know women are busy, from 5 to 25 minutes, you can get something that hopefully will help you feel more confident and more comfortable with your choices around cannabis.
Sweet.
And all you men out there listening, you can listen. It's not.
You can listen. We have men.
We want you to know they are a women's podcast, but it's for men. I've listened to it. I think they're great. So, I mean, men, listen.
Just
maybe
listen.
you'll learn something about women. Okay,
thank you,
so-
Mr. Weedman.
And Ellen, I want to point out, this is super cool. You were chosen to be part of the inaugural Female 50 honorees chosen by High Times Magazine. So it was a list to showcase the top 50 women championing cannabis. So congratulations on that.
That actually is April Pride, who
Oh,
was
shoot.
the inaugural
That was April
host of our
Pride?
show. No, she is an incredible woman in cannabis, and she has been the host of the show. And I will be hosting it going forward. But April is an amazing resource for women in cannabis, and
Well, we're gonna say one
very
thing to High
well
Times.
recognized.
Get Ellen on that list.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
2021. All right, High Times. I know I don't have a relationship with you, but Mr. Weedman is just letting you know that this woman of cannabis right here is a badass, and she belongs on the cover.
Wow.
Do the
We're
pot.
speaking it. We're
Do the
speaking it
pot.
for you, Ellen.
I might not ever get invited, but damn it, I'm gonna try to get you on that cover. Do the pot.
Do the pot.
Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate you. And
Thank you both so much for having me. This has been great.
hey, everyone, I want to thank you all for listening. As always, Women's History Month. This is not the end of it, but it's the last day of the month for it. But women are going to make history in cannabis. We want to thank you all for listening. We appreciate you all. Don't forget to check us out on Weedman420 Chronicles on Insta, Weedman420 Pod on Twitter. Shoot us an email, Weedman420Chronicles@gmail.com. I want to thank everybody who's been emailing us. Been getting a lot lately. Some guests that want to come on. We'll figure this out. Thank you all for listening. As Paulie always says, smoke smart, puff puffing away.
Puff, puff, pass.